us on this Tuesday night. This is actually the second time that we've run this class today. We ran it earlier in the day as well. Both of these are live sessions. So for those of you on here, these aren't pre-recorded talking heads. We're here for real in real time. We'll be answering your questions. And then for those of you watching the replay, I just want to actually say, if you're watching the replay and you don't get the chance to watch questions, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. You'll get a follow-up email. Actually, everyone on here is going to get a follow-up email from chris@chrisoutdoors.ca. So feel free to reach out with any questions after this class. This morning's class went really well. We had a ton of fun. And I hope tonight is going to be a really fun and educational evening as well. So maybe I'll just tell you what we're doing really quickly, and then I'll introduce our guest speaker here, and then we'll dive in. But I'm going to pull up a slide just for a moment here. Give me 1 second and go over our game plan for this evening. So tonight's class is called Mushrooms Made Easy, Growing, Foraging, and Working with Fungi as Medicine. And I've got Shane O'Donnell here from Heartwood Mushrooms that's going to be, sharing some really cool stuff about working with fungi medicine. And I learned a ton during his presentation this morning. So I hope you guys are going to find a lot of value in it. The game plan for this evening. So we're going to be approximately an hour and a half. And we'll probably be pretty close to that. I think we were actually right on with that time in this morning's call. And the flow is going to look like this. I'm going to do a little bit of a quick intro about kind of my learning journey and kind of create a bit of context for the perspective I'm teaching from. We're going to talk about mushroom ecology and the fascinating role that mushrooms and fungi play out in nature. I'm going to be sharing some of the easiest ways to start growing at home, both indoors and out. We're going to talk about kind of do an intro to both safe and sustainable wild foraging, because we're right on the cusp of the wild foraging season here. I've got a couple classes that are coming up. I'm going to let you guys know about ways to come and learn more if you'd like to have myself and my wife, Laura, as a mentor to help you really go deep. And then I'm going to pass it over to Shane, who's going to do a bit of a deep dive into starting to work with mushrooms as medicine. And again, I think you guys are going to find this really interesting, or you folks are going to find this really interesting when Shane does this. As I said, I've been learning and studying mushrooms for 20 years, and I learned a bunch from Shane this morning. So I'm pretty excited. And then we're going to end the whole thing with a question and answer. During the presentation, feel free to put questions in the chat as we go along, and we will do our best. I'm not going to be monitoring it when I'm talking. I'm going to be focused on the presentation, but Shane will be in there, and vice versa. When Shane's in there, I'll be in there. If nobody answers your question, though, just hold on to it at the end and bring it back up, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can at the end of the evening. So that is our game plan for tonight, folks. Mushrooms made easy. And hopefully you're going to feel a little less overwhelmed and a little less intimidated. So before we dive into the presentation, though, some real quick introductions. I suspect most of you probably know who I am, Chris Outdoors. Maybe I'll share a little bit about my story in a moment. But first, let me introduce this guy on the left of me or right of me here, Shane O'Donnell. Shane runs Heartwood Mushrooms. And maybe I'll just have Shane share a couple of things about what Heartwood's all about and who he is.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm Shane, founder, owner of Heartwood Mushrooms. I've been growing mushrooms for over 12 years. We specialize in gourmet and functional mushrooms up in Northern Ontario. We do distribute around the rest of Ontario and Canada. We also do grow-at-home kits, mushroom spice blends, dried value-added mushroom products, and mushroom education. And when I'm bored of that, I also work on soil remediation with fungi and making cool things out of mycelium.
Yeah, the more I get to know Shane, the more I think of him as a bit of like a mad scientist when it comes to fungi. It's really cool, all the nerdy stuff in his brain and all the cool experiments he has going on. So I'm very much a like home scale DIY guy where he's like the scientist. So I think we're actually kind of a fun team for what we're delivering here tonight. It was actually really fun. We were just kind of, shooting the breeze before everyone jumped on here tonight. And I was telling Shane that, I poured myself a bit of chaga tea before coming on. Something we just started doing this year that we love. If any of you are in maple country and the maples happen to still be running, we didn't have time to actually boil maple syrup this year. So we just tapped a couple of maple trees, but we've been taking the maple sap and then we've been brewing chaga tea in the maple sap. And oh my goodness, it's so delicious. This sweet maple chaga, like just loving this right now. So I was telling Shane about my chaga tea, and then he mentioned one of the Heartwood mushroom spice blends that he uses and how he had done up a chicken breast in it for dinner. And it sounded delicious. So already having some fun, nerdy conversations here. So let's dive into tonight. And I'm going to start with a little bit of a story. I think I'm going to pull up the presentation here first and just provide a little bit of a background kind of for the context for where I'm coming from here. And really, the perspective I want to teach from tonight is around building relationship with the fungi, and looking them at as literally like allies and friends in this world, as opposed to just resources that we're going to extract. And that's really foundational to the way that I approach the natural world in general. Um, this morning I was having my morning coffee thinking about these two classes that we're going to run today. And I was reflecting on how cool it is that I'm actually the one teaching this class now. Because a little over 20 years ago, when I was first getting into like farming, organic farming and growing food, and really going on that entry level kind of naturalist journey, like learning about ecology and nature and survival skills and all those things, I was actually really intimidated by and even fearful of mushrooms. I heard a couple stories of like mycologists literally like poisoning their families because they had the wrong identification. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm just not going to touch mushrooms. So I got really into plant foraging and herbal medicine for about a decade. But I really stayed away from mushrooms early on in my journey because I was just terrified, because there are a lot of poisonous mushrooms. So it's kind of cool that, over 2 decades later, here I am actually introducing other people to mushrooms. And I want to share that, one, you don't need to be afraid of mushrooms. Two, you do need to have a very healthy respect for mushrooms. There are many more mushrooms that can make you sick or even kill you than there probably are plants in North America. And the identification features are often much more subtle. So you really do need to know what you're doing when you get into foraging mushrooms. With that said, there are some safer groups to get started with, and there's some really good rules that if you know them starting out, you can actually feel pretty confident getting started earlier in your journey than I did. I probably held on to that fear longer than I needed to. So we don't need to be afraid of mushrooms. We do want to have a healthy respect. The next part I want to share for just kind of creating a little bit of context tonight. What do I mean by relationship when it comes to mushrooms? Because I can think back to, kind of 25 years ago when I first started exploring natural health. And I do remember buying like mushroom supplements and all of these herbs, but I hadn't actually had experience going out and harvesting them from the land yet, or foraging them, actually relating them with them, getting to know them in their habitat. And I remember spending a lot of money on supplements, taking them and not really feeling any effect, and having no clue were they actually working. I was sure spending a lot of money. Was it actually doing anything? It's hard to know. And I kind of dabbled in that for years. What's really cool, jumping ahead a little over 2 decades now, though, is I've come to feel like the mushrooms and the fungi and the plants are actually like friends and allies of mine. And it's amazing, the better we get to know our friends, the more their gifts really shine and the more we're able to see their gifts. So I'll give you an example. You probably have a bunch of folks in your life that are acquaintances, people you kind of know, their name, you've had a few conversations. But if you're having a major health problem, or you're really struggling mentally, or something's going on in your family, you're probably not going to that acquaintance asking them for support on a deep personal issue, right? And now you've got a group of friends, and within them, you kind of, if you know them really well, you probably know like their strengths, and I'll just say that the challenging parts about different friends, or you might know that certain friends would be more supportive in a scenario than other friends would be. So now I have an issue going on. I don't just go to any friend, I go to that specific friend, because I know that friend is the one that I can lean on in this scenario. When I started working with plants and mushrooms, I just didn't think of them in that way. I thought of them from that like kind of Western science perspective, where it's like, this plant is good for this. And I'd read it in a book, and, A plus B equals C. And I've come to realize that, herbal medicine and fungi medicine doesn't quite work in that same way. This relationship piece is actually really, really important. And now it's really beautiful, because I've actually had a couple health issues that I've gone through this year. One of them is I had a bout of diverticulitis. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up. It's this, I've had a bit of an issue in my stomach. It might actually be genetic. And what's been really amazing is chaga tea, as well as working with turkey tail, have been really supportive in actually healing my gut and regrowing my microbiome for my gut. And healing from this ailment that I had. So that's been really, really interesting. Another really cool one, literally right now, I've been kind of on the edge of a cold the last couple of years. Last couple of days, I've been fighting a bit of a cold. So I've been having mushroom infused bone broth. So this is a bone broth that we make ourselves, and it's infused with turkey tail. I think there's some birch polypore. There's some reishi in there. There's lion's mane. So a bunch of really great medicinal mushrooms infused in the bone broth, and then taking the chaga maple tea and mixing it half and half with ginger tea. Ginger tea, a really great antiviral herb and immune supportive herb. But oh my goodness, split it in half with the chaga, which also has antiviral properties and immune supporting properties. It's a fantastically delicious drink. That's actually what I'm drinking right now. It's a half ginger, half maple chaga. So I share all of this to say that, when I started my journey taking supplements and getting into natural health, I would spend a lot of money and I didn't really know whether things were working. Now I spend very little money. I forage a lot of these things myself or grow them myself. Or if I do buy them, I'm buying them from a really trusted source like Shane from Heartwood, where I know he knows what he's doing and the concentrations are right and they're prepared right. And two, I can actually feel them working in my body. The relationship has evolved to that place where it's like, I know which one I need for which thing, and I can actually feel the impact. And wow, that's a good feeling. And that's why I say, the fungi are becoming like friends. So part of my goal for tonight is to my hope is that this inspires you to deepen your relationship with the fungi in this world and in your life. Just to hit on some of the other immune properties really quick, and then we'll dive into the main presentation, which I'm going to get into ecology, get into growing, and then get into foraging. And then Shane's going to hit up medicine last. But I want to just hit up a couple of the other amazing traits that go along with fungi. And these are not universal across all fungi. This is kind of a generalization right now. And dosing, preparation, all of these things absolutely matter in this. So yeah, just keep that in mind when you're listening to this. This isn't an A plus B equals C, one size fits all thing I'm putting up here by any means. But many fungi are very high in antioxidants, like very high in antioxidants and immune supporting. So antiviral and just great for general health and just well-being, and are really supportive in recovery. There's actually a lot of fascinating research right now on people actually recovering from cancer, going through chemotherapy or immunotherapy for cancer, and how supportive different mushrooms are, and actually in conjunction with Western cancer treatments. And there's tons of actual scientific data out on that, and papers being released on some of the research being done with that. They're immune modulating, some of them. So people that have autoimmune diseases, they can be really supportive in various autoimmune diseases. Many of them have adaptogenic properties and also really support our adrenal system. So they can be really supportive for people that are dealing with anxiety, dealing with burnout, things like that have burnt out adrenal systems. There's a number of fungi that are super supportive, antiviral, antibacterial, antimicrobial. It was interesting. So the first time that I had COVID, I was actually dealing with a bunch of kind of nervous system stuff in the aftermath of it. And it took me, it was about 2 weeks after I'd had COVID, and I was still dealing with some lingering nervous system stuff. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, you know what? I need fungi right now, because I wasn't taking mushrooms up until that point. And I started taking lion's mane, cordyceps, and reishi. And I felt, and this is anecdotal, of course, I don't have a scientific study to back this up, but those three mushrooms, and there's a lot of studies supporting lion's mane in your nervous system, particularly reishi as well. But the reishi, the lion's mane, and the cordyceps really felt like it got me over the hump of some of those lingering long COVID symptoms that I was dealing with. And I feel absolutely fine now. So I'm super thankful for them for that as well. Gut health, they're really big. I mentioned particularly the chaga and the turkey tail I've been taking recently quite a bit to help in my gut health. And then brain health. There's a ton of really cool research on lion's mane specifically, with memory being used with people that have Alzheimer's disease, people with concussions. And Shane's going to actually get into that a little bit tonight. He's actually going to be talking about a week from tonight. Shane and I are actually doing another class like this that's going to be a real deep dive into lion's mane. So we're going to be talking all about the medicinal benefits of lion's mane, how to use it, integrate it in your life, and how to grow lion's mane at home. But that's for people that are inside of our mushroom growing course that are going to have access to that. And I'll tell you a little bit about that course later on. So, yeah, I won't say too much more else about myself. I do want to introduce my wife, Laura, really quick to you, though, as well. And so this is Laura here, and we live on a little homestead up in Muskoka, region of Ontario. And when we bought this homestead 15 years ago, it was our goal to try to eat as bioregional as possible. So grow, forage, hunt, and fish a substantial amount of our food, and try to do that as sustainably as possible. And I tell you this story because I honestly can say that growing mushrooms has been the biggest game changer in being able to take a jump forward in our self-reliance and our food security. And I think, folks, I know a lot of people are thinking a lot about that right now. We're watching grocery bills go through the roof and food rising. We're also seeing how unstable some of the infrastructure around our food and transportation systems are. Whether it was all the backlogs we saw during COVID or it's what we're seeing now with the tariffs, this international food system is actually quite fragile. And a lot of people are kind of waking up to that. So I think there is a real, I'll just say it this way. I think it's really smart and it's not paranoid at all to be thinking about strengthening local food systems and your local food security. One way to take a leap forward in that is actually growing mushrooms or learning to forage mushrooms. And the reason for this is that, on our homestead, there is very few things that we can produce more than we can consume in a year. And mushrooms are one of them. We grow more mushrooms than we can actually physically eat in a year. And it takes us very little work to actually do that and very little space. There's a lot of other crops in our garden that are quite labor intensive. And really, we get a couple nice meals, maybe a little bit in the freezer for a treat in the winter. Not even close to a year worth of food for a lot more work. Our mushrooms, an entire year worth of food for very little work relatively. So they literally have been one of those things that helped us take a leap forward. And my hope is that if you're thinking about food security and self-reliance, rising grocery bills, coming out of tonight, you might be inspired to say, whether I live in the city, an urban apartment, or on a little homestead out in the country or a rural property, maybe I don't need to be intimidated by mushrooms. Maybe I actually could take a leap forward in my food security and grow a whole bunch myself. So that's one of my goals tonight, is to kind of inspire you that. I am going to just do a quick little shout out here. So all these classes that we do are free. We're going to make sure that we deliver a ton of actual value and tangible takeaways tonight. So that is one of our goals for this evening. So I hope you brought your notebook. But one of the ways that we're able to do this stuff for free is by letting you know about some of the paid offerings that we have. So I do just want to tell you about a cool offering coming up that Laura's offering. So this is my wife, Laura, again there. That's her with a little bear's tooth mushroom up in the top corner there. And on the right, that's her picking some wild leeks up here in Muskoka. So Laura has a cool business called Wild Muskoka Botanicals. And I'm actually going to throw a little pop-up in here right now. So give me a second. Here we go. You should see a little link pop up here. But if you would like to actually have a mentor and a guide in your mushroom journey, like an in-person one, and you happen to live in Ontario or like in the GTA, Southern Ontario, we're up in Muskoka. Laura runs this really cool class called Fungi is Kin. And I think there's 2 spots left in it. It starts up next month in May. And basically, you get together with Laura in the spring, the summer, and again in the fall, all for one day. And you get to learn which mushrooms you can forage throughout the different seasons of the year. You get to learn what the mushrooms look like at different seasons. You get to learn about the ecological communities. And you also get to do medicine making with Laura in this class. So you'll literally make a dual extract mushroom tincture as part of this class. So if anybody is interested in actually having a mentor to go really deep in mushroom identification, like wild mushroom identification and medicine making and foraging, and you live in Ontario, check out that link I just put up on the screen there for Laura's Fungi is Kin medicine making class. You can also check out some of our other cool stuff over at wildmuskoka.com. So I'll just leave that up for one more minute. If anybody else wants to click on it. I'm actually going to take a sip of my chaga tea here. I can get talking really fast. So when I take a sip of tea, it helps me slow down a little bit as well. I'm going to put up a link to one other one of Laura's classes, and then we're going to dive into the actual main lesson for tonight. So all of this has been kind of the preamble to the actual content piece. So don't worry, we got a lot coming for you still. The other class I want to tell you about really quick is called the Wild Medicine Program. And it's also an in-person class that happens one day a month up here in program with Laura as well. But this one is more geared towards foraging and plant medicine. So if you're interested in having a in-person mentor to learn about wild foraging plants, again, learning it throughout the different seasons, how to do it safely, and then how to make your own medicine and food from wild plants, then check out Laura's Wild Medicine Program. And I've got the link for there up as well. And I think that class, there's a Thursday class and there's a Saturday class. And again, I think there's maybe 2 spots left in it or something like that. So they're getting close to full. But I did want to let you folks know about those 2 amazing offerings for our Ontario folks tonight. And with that said, let's dive in. And if you have any questions about those classes, feel free to ask them at the end in the Q&A. So let's talk mushroom ecology here. Getting to understand the ecology of mushrooms is essential in being able to grow them, being able to forage them sustainably, and being a good steward of the land, as well as being able to do it safely. And hopefully this story exemplifies why. So in the chat, I'd imagine some people have an idea, but what are the two mushrooms? Or actually, mushrooms is the wrong term. One of these I could call a mushroom. The other one, it would actually be more proper to just say a fungi. It's not actually a mushroom. So what are the two fungi specimens that I have up here on the picture? Throw them in the chat if you know what they are. And why I put these up is these two fungi actually have very different life cycles, very different strategies. Cool. Someone said reishi and shelf mushrooms. Someone said turkey tail, chaga and ganoderma, or chaga and reishi. Yes. So not turkey tail. The one on the left is a chaga fungi. The black one that looks like charred wood is a chaga fungus. The red one on the right is our Ganoderma tsuge, which is our hemlock reishi that grows here in this part of the eastern woodlands. And why I put these two up here is they're fundamentally different in their growing strategy. And this is really important if you want to know how to harvest them sustainably. So let's start with the Ganoderma, the reishi mushroom. The reishi mushroom is what we call a saprophytic mushroom. So its role in nature, it basically grows on dead wood. So dead hemlock trees, specifically with the reishi. So the tree is already dead. The mushroom spores land on it. They eat the wood. And then when it's ready to reproduce, it sends out a reishi mushroom. Maybe I better back up a little bit, even explain this, because some people might not know this. I didn't know this when I first started getting into mushrooms 20 years ago. So reishi mushroom, I almost went on another tangent. This is my second time doing this today, so I'm getting a little tired here. Saprophytic mushrooms and the life cycle of a mushroom. So the mushroom, a lot of people think that the mushroom is the organism, which actually isn't true. The mushroom is one tiny little part of a much larger organism, which is the mycelium. Those mycelial masses might fill an entire tree. They might extend out into the soil. They might be running through the leaves over the width of a football field or more. You can have massive, massive organisms where you can't see most of it because it's underground or it's in wood. This is the mycelium. When the mycelium is ready to reproduce, it creates a mushroom, which is the fruiting body to let the spores out, right? So it's almost more like, think of the analogy of an apple on an apple tree. The apple isn't the organism. The apple is the fruiting body of the apple tree, and the apple tree and the roots is the greater organism. So that's the first thing that's important to know there. So reishi mushrooms, the mycelium is growing in the tree, and it's going to send out those mushrooms every single year. And they're going to grow quite quickly. You know, they grow over the course of about a month, you know, maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks. They release their spores, and then the mushroom basically falls off if somebody doesn't come along and forage them. Theoretically, I could go up to a reishi tree or like a hemlock tree with reishi like that, and I could cut every single reishi off there, and they're still going to come back next year. So that's kind of cool to know that even if I took them all, they're still going to come back last year because the mycelium is in the tree itself. Now, I need to put a big pause up there and say, please do not harvest all of the reishi off of the tree. I've actually heard foragers make the argument that it's okay to take all the mushrooms because they will come back. What I really don't like about that argument is it's very anthropocentric, meaning it's putting humans first. And it's failing to recognize what role does reishi have in the ecosystem beyond our human needs. Those mushrooms are food and medicine for other wild animals. They need to release spores to carry on their production cycle. If I take them all off before they go to spore, those spores aren't being released. When those mushrooms fall to the ground, they're helping build soil. How many other uses are there of those mushrooms that we don't even know about as humans because there's such subtle relationships in the ecology of the forest? So I would never condone taking all of the mushrooms. Yes, they'll come back, but it doesn't mean that we're not having a negative impact by taking too many. So there's just something to think about there. Now, how many years that tree produces those for really depends on how big it is, how long it takes to eat the food source, but it can often be, you know, for quite a few years. So now let's talk about the chaga fungi, which is a very, very different species. Chaga is a type of Skullrata, and I might be pronouncing that quickly, but its life cycle is fundamentally different, and it's not the fruiting body. It does not release spores, and it does not grow every year. You can come across chaga mushrooms that are 15, 20, 25 years old. So every year that mushroom just keeps growing and gets a little bigger, a little bigger, a little bigger, a little bigger. Chaga is what we call a parasitic mushroom. So it finds a wound in a birch tree. The spores land in the wound. It colonizes the wound or myceliates the wound, and the fungus starts growing out there of the birch tree, right? Now, if what's really interesting is the chaga doesn't actually release its spore until after the birch dies, sometimes a couple of years after the birch dies. So imagine this, the reishi releases spores every single year to help it spread through the forest. The chaga needs to grow for maybe 10, 15, 20 years. Then the tree dies. Then a year later, it releases the spores. So it could be 25, 30 years to actually put out those spores to reproduce. If I was to go and rip that whole chaga fungi off the tree and cause that birch to die early because I've now reopened that wind, maybe moisture gets in there, it rots and falls over, that tree may or may not actually release spores now. I might have just sped up the cycle. Beyond that, there's no need to do that, because if you want to come back and harvest from that chaga year after year after year, you actually can, or maybe every few years. If I go up to that chaga and I take a saw or a chisel and I just cut like a third off of the outside of it and leave the other 2/3 there, it'll actually keep growing. And then I can come back in a few years and take another chunk off of there. And something great to know about chaga, it always hurts me when I see people like coming back from the woods with like big baskets full of chaga. Because it's like a big basket's full of chaga, that might be like 10 years of medicine for your family. Like you really don't need to use a lot of it. A very little amount goes a long ways. So with the maple sap right now, we've got a big, it's maybe a 2-gallon pot on our wood stove. And I fill it up with the maple sap. And I've dropped maybe 5 or 6 chunks of chaga that are like the size of a quarter in there. Okay. That whole thing is gone dark black from the chaga. And what we'll do is we'll basically serve it up until it's drained right down. And then we'll fill it back up with water and maple sap and brew those same chunks again. And those same chunks will brew for 1 to 2 weeks, still making good quality medicine on there, right? Just a tiny, we're talking like a tennis ball worth of chaga is giving me a couple of weeks of medicine. And I don't drink chaga as a tonic year round. I like it once in a while as a treat. And I like using it for acute things. Like, so right now I'm healing from a stomach issue. I'm also fighting a cold. So I've been drinking chaga more than I usually would lately. But once I kind of get through this little bout, I probably won't drink any chaga for a month or more. There's a bit of controversy around whether it should be used or tonic or not. And we're not going to get into the night, but I'm on this side that I use it more for acute situations and as a treat once in a while. Anyways, hopefully that little piece on the ecology there is relevant to you or interesting to you when we think about ecology and sustainability. So where do we go from here? This is just a cool picture here of the, so this is the birch tree that's split open, and the spores actually are coming off of the wood from the dead tree. So Laura and I came across this out in the woods last year. It was really, really cool to come across. So I just had a little picture of that there. So the next thing I want to chat about when it comes to ecology is just understanding the role of them in nature. So one of the roles that one of the roles that fungi play that's really fascinating is symbiotic relationships between species. So another pop quiz here for the naturalists. There are 2 plants in a picture there. What are those 2 plants is question 1. Question number 2 is, what do they have in common? What are those 2 plants and what do they have in common? Give it a go in the chat if you can there. Oh, any takers? Nice. Fern and horsetails. And Melissa nailed it. Oh, so did Wendy. So both ferns and horsetails are spore-producing plants. Almost all of our other plants and trees here on Earth reproduce through seeds, right? Seeds, like when you go to plant a tomato seed, you have a little seed. That's very different than a spore. A spore are these tiny, like little microscopic pieces of an organism, not at all like a seed in the way that they function. And why this is super, super fascinating. So ferns, horsetails, and club moss are thought to be 3 of the oldest plant species on Earth and some of the first plants to actually have a vascular system, meaning they were able to grow off the Earth's surface towards the sun to better photosynthesize. Prior to that, it was believed that all plants' life were single-celled organisms. They didn't have a vascular system, which means they didn't have the ability to transport fluids. So every single part of the cell had to basically do everything, and every single cell had to be able to photosynthesize in and of its self because it didn't have the ability to spread nutrients. The very first plants to grow off the Earth's floor and reach up towards the sun and now can actually transport fluids, transport light and energy through them were actually spore producing plants. Why? Because they formed a symbiotic relationship with the fungi that allowed them to be able to, the fungi basically created the transportation system for exchange of nutrients. Super, super fascinating. And that's an oversimplified explanation, but it gives you the idea of how cool they are. From there, they evolved into more complex seed systems, which were our conifer trees first, those like hard seeds. And then that evolved into what we call angiosperms, which are the seeds of deciduous trees and the majority of plants that we have today. So that's really neat. Another cool thing about them in ecology is interspecies communication. So fungi are amazing, play this amazing role through the fungal networks, can actually exchange information between different tree types and even trees and plants. So we have the internet where we exchange information through the World Wide Web between each other. The internet of the forest is the mycelium, those fungal masses that exchanges information. They play a foundational role in decomposing dead matter in the forest. So like breaking down trees into and recycling them in the soil. So nutrient cycling, they play a really pivotal role. You take the mycelium out of the forest ecosystem collapses. Like that's how foundational they are in the forest. They're also a significant source of food and medicine for wildlife as well. Many, many different species feed on them. So fungi have such an important role in ecology. And for that, I'm ever grateful for the fungi nation. I'm not going to spend too much time on this next slide, but there's a couple interesting categories. And there's many different ways that we can categorize fungi, but here's a couple of terms that you might hear that are kind of interesting to think about. So one is saprophytic, and we talked about these are the decomposers. The vast majority of mushrooms that we grow and many of the ones that we forage fall into this category of saprophytic mushrooms, basically the decomposers. So oyster mushrooms, button mushrooms, lion's mane mushrooms, reishi mushrooms, these are all saprophytic mushrooms. Mycorrhizae are those ones that are responsible for those symbiotic relationships. And you can have mushrooms that fall into multiple different categories here. Parasitic mushrooms are ones that infect a host. So chaga is a parasitic mushroom. Cordyceps, that's one of the ones I mentioned I was taking for COVID. Honey mushrooms. There's many edible and medicinal parasitic mushrooms. So don't take parasitic as a bad thing. Parasites in nature aren't fundamentally bad. In our human Western minds, we often think parasite equals bad, but that's actually not the case in nature. Parasites are actually an essential part of ecology. Many parasitic mushrooms are actually very beneficial for humans. They're just parasites because they parasitize a different species. They need a different species to help carry out a component of their life cycle. The next part, and this is starting to transition into part 2 of this class tonight, where we're going to get into intro to growing mushrooms. And that is understanding the life cycle of a mushroom. To be able to grow mushrooms, we need to understand what they need. What does their life cycle look like? And what are their needs at each part of the life cycle? So as a grower, we can make sure we meet those needs at each part of the life cycle. So we already talked about this idea of a spore being released out into the world. So let's start here. A mushroom grows up. It releases a spore and probably releases hundreds of thousands, if not millions of spores. Like they're almost microscopic. They're floating through the atmosphere and they land all over the place. The majority of those will never grow and turn into another mushroom. Most of them will probably dry up because they land in an area that's not suitable habitat for them. But this first phase we call habitat discovery. It lets out all of these spores, and a handful of them are going to land on a piece of habitat that actually creates suitable growing conditions. They do this thing called spore mating, where a couple of those spores will start sending out mycelial threads, and they'll connect with each other and say, hey, this has water, it has enough food, it has the right oxygen, all these different things that we need. Let's do this, let's grow. The next phase is what we call substrate colonization or substrate myceliation. And this part is actually usually something we don't see as humans because it's happening in the dark. It's happening inside of the tree. It's happening underneath the leaves, whatever the substrate is. And substrate is just the medium that things are growing on. So there's often, a period of months to years where there are no mushrooms, but the mycelium is basically consuming the food source quietly, hiddenly. Once it's consumed a good chunk of that food source, it starts thinking about reproduction. So that mycelium starts to get dense and forms these little mycelial masses that start to pin. And then those pins grow into an actual mushroom. It releases its spore. The cycle repeats itself. Why this is really important to understand, though, is because fungi have different needs at each stage, right? So let's talk about what is a fungal's growth requirements in the first place. First, they need food. And for most species, that's a carbon source. So when we're growing them, common sources that we grow on, we'll grow on wood chips, we'll grow on sawdust, we'll grow on coffee grinds, we'll grow on logs, we'll grow on coconut husks. There's all kinds of carbon sources that we can grow on. Some even grow on manure. The next thing they need is moisture. Most fungi need really high humidity to grow. This is pretty foundational, and this is actually important at all stages of the growth cycle. The third thing we need is gas exchange. So air needs to come in, oxygen in, carbon dioxide out. Now, this is really interesting, though, because if I go back to our life cycle pattern here, during the myceliation or colonization phase, mushrooms actually don't need a lot of oxygen or off-gassing. They also don't need any light. Because if you think about inside of a log with bark on it, it's completely dark in there, right? There's also very little oxygen inside there. There might be a little bit, but very little inside the log itself. So during that colonization phase, it needs food, it needs humidity, but it does not need the light. It does not need much oxygen. But when it starts to pin and it starts to fruit, that's when the needs change. And during that fruiting phase, all four of these are essential. It needs oxygen in, carbon dioxide out, and it needs light. It needs adequate light to grow. That's a bit of a myth. Some people think mushrooms grow in the dark. Most mushrooms need diffuse light, not direct sunlight, but diffuse light to actually be able to grow. Okay, so let's transition into our growing part of the evening tonight. So I'm going to talk about growing. I'm going to talk a little bit about foraging, and then I'm going to pass it over to Shane, who's going to dive into medicine making to finish us off for the evening. And then we'll do that little question and answer at the end for those of you that maybe missed the intro there. So one of the easiest ways to get started is to actually just go and buy yourself what they call like a mushroom grow block that's ready to go. So somebody like Shane with Heartwood, this is like one of the things that his business does, is they will actually do the hardest part for you. And I don't even do this part myself because this is really scientific. It takes a lot of work. It has to be very sterile and clean the environment. We're literally talking about like syringes and petri dishes to get to the point that you have a grow block. So I have played around with that and had some success. But a number of years ago, after playing around with it, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go buy a grow block off of a guy like Shane and use that as my starting point. So for me, buying a grow block is kind of like going to a garden store and buying seed. Yes, you can save your own seed, but you can also just go buy them and it saves you that extra little bit of work. Grow blocks are amazing. So you buy them and usually it's a sawdust that's already been inoculated with mycelium. The myceliums already grow. You cut it open and you let it grow. And you'll get, sometimes 2, 3, 4 flushes of mushrooms out of one of these grow blocks. So grow blocks are a really great way to get started because they're a good way to learn and build a relationship with the organism. If you have kids, or a homeschool group, or even if you're a teacher, this is a great science experiment to do with youth. It's really easy and quick. It's a lot of fun. Now, what's the disadvantage of a grow block? I mean, if you just want to have some fun, you want to learn, you get a few flushes, there is no real disadvantage. But if you're actually thinking about self-reliance, food security, or you're thinking about cost of your mushrooms, you're probably not saving a lot of mushrooms buying a grow block. I don't know what they cost this day. I'm sure Shane can tell us, but I think grow blocks, I think the last time I bought one was around $30 for the grow block. And I might have grown like $35 of mushrooms out of them, right? So I didn't get a lot of mushrooms for what I paid for the grow block. But you have a really, really cool way to come into right relationship with their food. There, Shane just said $25 to $35 per kit coming out there. And Shane, feel free to correct me if I'm off on some of my numbers here a little bit, like even around how much mushrooms you think you would get out of it and what the value of that might be. I know it would depend a little bit on species. But if you're actually thinking about long-term self-reliance, you're probably not going to want to just keep buying grow blocks over and over again and just get those few flushes and then have to spend more money and do it again. So this is what I teach people how to do inside of my courses. And that's basically how to go to a guy like Shane, buy the grow block, but then expand the grow block and turn those 4 flushes of mushrooms into dozens, if not hundreds of flushes of mushrooms from that same $30 grow box. So check out this picture right here. That one on the left there, that white, looks a little bit like mold, but it's not. That white is actually oyster mushroom mycelium, and it's growing in straw in a 5-gallon bucket. So what I do is I take that $30 grow block and I take like a golf ball to a tennis ball amount out of it. And there might be, 20, and I'm kind of making this number up. It's rough, but let's say there's 20 tennis balls worth of mycelium in that grow block. I take one of those and I put it into a 5-gallon bucket, which is way bigger than the grow block was in the first place. That mycelium now grows through that whole 5-gallon bucket, and then it fruits out of the 5-gallon bucket. So I actually grow way more mushrooms out of the 5-gallon bucket than I would have off the grow block in the first place. I still get my 3 or 4 flushes, but I still have the other 29 or 19 tennis balls left there. So then I take another tennis ball and I do that in another one. And I take another tennis ball and I do that in another one. And suddenly I have 20 5-gallon buckets. Now I've gone from $30 of mushrooms to hundreds, if not thousands of dollars of mushrooms. And how this really starts to become regenerative when we're thinking about food security and self-reliance. So hopefully that's kind of making sense to folks there. So let's look at a couple different ways that we can grow. So I grow year round. I grow outdoor in the winter. I'm going to share like that in a second. And I grow indoor. Sorry, I grow indoor in the winter times, outdoor in the summer, spring, summer, fall. And some of the mediums, that one on the top right there, that's a fun one I love doing. So those are blue oyster mushrooms growing out of a mason jar on spent coffee grinds. So I literally inoculate the coffee grind. So I take a waste product from my coffee, inoculate it with the mycelium, and get a second yield out of a waste product. Then I take the mycelium after I've got 2 or 3 flushes of mushrooms, and I feed it to my vermicomposter worms. So my compost worms. So it's like superfood for them. Then those compost worms turn that into frass or scat. So basically manure, worm manure. And I use that to water the starts for my vegetable starts that I just planted by seeds. So see how we're able to start cycling nutrients within our little homestead to be more self-reliant, more self-sufficient, and grow healthier vegetables because of the way that we're cycling these nutrients through the ecosystem. Now, I do that on a small homestead. You could do this in an urban apartment. In an urban apartment, you could literally grow oysters in a coffee or in a mason jar, take the grinds, have a worm composter under your sink, and then use that as fertilizer for some plants that you grow through a window. And now you're not needing to buy fertilizer anymore, right? It's amazing how much fungi actually have to offer us. So anyways, oyster mushrooms in a mason jar, top right. The bottom right, there's some elm oysters growing out of a 5-gallon bucket. And I love this picture on the left here. This is actually a student of my online mushroom growing course, and she sent me this. This was the first batch of mushrooms that she grew on her own. So these are yellow oyster mushrooms that she's growing on the front balcony of her cottage. And she was so excited to eat these big flesh of mushrooms. She sent me this email all excited. So I was really excited that I was able to help her do this through one of the online courses I'm going to tell you about in a little bit. So there's a little bit about indoor growing. One thing I'll say, and this is super, super important. So we talked about safety when foraging. You also need to consider safety with growing as well, though. And a lot of people overlook this one. So if you are growing indoors, mushrooms release spores, large quantities of spores. Now, we all breathe in spores all the time. If you walk through the woods in the summer or the fall, you're breathing in spores. If you open your window in the summer or the fall, spores are coming into your house. But there's small amounts that are diluted across the landscape, right? If you grow multiple blocks of mushrooms indoors side by side and they all release spores together, that's a lot of spores in a closed airspace. That is not healthy for humans. It can actually make you very sick. People can even develop long-term mushroom allergies from spore exposure that become lifelong chronic issues. So I'm not saying this to scare you. I grow indoors. I have no worries about mushroom allergies. I have no worries about my health, but I have to put some things in place to mitigate against those spore releases. And it's not that hard to do, but it's essential to do if you're growing in any kind of quantity. You know, if you're just doing like a mason jar on your sink, it's probably so little that I wouldn't be too worried about it personally. Or if you're just, maybe doing one grow block. And I'd be curious to get Shane's thought on this afterwards. I would consider a small amount generally not something I'm worried about. But if you're getting much more than that, you definitely want to start thinking about mitigating. You also want to think about protecting your home, because the last thing you want to do is have some of that mycelium escape and start growing in a damp carpet. and suddenly you've got mycelium growing into the wood and into the carpet of your home. That is not good, right? So you do need to make sure that you're thinking about safety when you set up an indoor growing setup. Okay, outdoor on logs. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but in essence, I go to a guy like Shane and I buy, again, my grow kit off of him, which is sawdust spawn that he's created. And then I drill holes in my logs and I put that spawn inside of it and I seal it up. There's a couple tricks, to the trade to increase your success. And then you basically let it colonize for 12 to 24 months. And then you have these logs start to produce. Now, this one might amaze people, and I think this is so cool. And this is why I've talked about how much of a difference mushrooms have made on our homestead, in our self-reliance, and our food security. My oldest producing mushroom log was still producing mushrooms after 9 years. So I literally inoculate it with spore once. I don't do it every year. I do it once. And then that log fruits 2 to 3 times a year for anywhere from 6 to 8 years, I'd say, on average. So you do the work once, you get 6 to 8 years of harvesting off it. There is nothing in my vegetable garden that I just plant and I can harvest for 8 years with almost no tending. Like, it's incredible how efficient they are. And it's incredible how many mushrooms come off of one log. So even with the logs, like in a 4x4 space behind a shed in a small urban backyard, you can actually grow a substantial amount of mushrooms. You could probably grow more shiitake than you can eat in a year in a 4x4 space. In an urban backyard. So really, really cool to consider here. The technique on the left there, that's actually called a log tower, and those are oyster mushrooms growing there. It's one of the other techniques I teach inside of the course, and there's reasons why you might want to try that over others. Another cool technique, so these are King Stropharia or wine cap mushrooms, and these ones we actually grow in the straw mulch inside our garden beds. So that picture on the left there, that's actually a pumpkin. So we're already growing the pumpkin there. Why not? And we use straw to basically use for weed suppression, but it also helps with soil building. And it means we need to water less because it holds the moisture in. So the straw already is helping us with so many things and creating a more resilient and efficient garden. Why not increase yield by inoculating the straw with mycelium? And now we're literally growing wine cap mushrooms in the understory of the squash plant canopy, right? So this is a great way to stack functions and increase the yield in a small space. So again, if you're thinking about self-reliance, and food security, you can grow a lot of wine caps in a very small space. Wine caps will come back year after year as well, to a certain extent. And they're a very prolific mushroom when you get them going. They're probably one of the easiest ones to actually grow and get started with. Okay, so I'm gonna do a really quick little poll right now. I meant to do this beginning, but I forgot it. I'm curious, just for interest right now. Where is my poll? Oh, here we are. Polls. Oh, did they not load? What? Oh, there it is. Okay. I'm going to throw this up right now. Gives me a break to stop talking for a second. I'm curious, out of all the topics we're getting into tonight, what are you most interested in? Growing mushrooms? Foraging mushrooms safely and sustainably? The health benefits of mushrooms, are all of the above? I meant to do this at the beginning and it just kind of popped into my head. So I thought it'd be a good second to take a little break, catch my breath. Nice. A lot of people in the all of the above category. Makes sense. I mean, these are all, why wouldn't you want to do all of these? They're all so great. Looks like foraging is in number 2, close behind there. Hopefully most of you, health benefits has the lowest score right now. I hope you're all thinking about the health benefits though, I'll say one little more piece on this before I get into the foraging piece here. So I talked about, all those different properties that mushrooms have. I think it's pretty uncanny to think about the state of the world right now. I have some concerns about where the world is at right now and where it's going, to be honest with you. And when I think about food security and infrastructure, mushrooms have this ability to help us get significantly more self-reliant fast and really improve local food security. But there's also a bit of an epidemic happening when it comes to human health right now. We have short staffed hospitals. We have a lack of doctors. We have aging infrastructure. And on top of that, we have all of these kind of emerging scenarios that are creating concern. Autoimmune diseases are rising. Things like epilepsy, things like attention deficit disorder. anxiety and depression, all of these things that are starting to raise as ailments for humans. And fungi offer so much to be able to support our human bodies in dealing with some of these coming ailments of our times. So I really think that, considering the health benefits of mushrooms should be top of mind. They really could be supportive for us in so many ways in this changing world and with some of the stresses that we face right now. I want to say one other thing that actually that's very important. And then I'll get into the foraging piece right now. I'm talking about mushrooms, all these amazing benefits of them. And I want to throw a caveat out there and almost a bit of a disclaimer too, and say that, they're not a magic bullet or a magic pill either. They're not a panacea that just does everything. And I do know some people talk about mushrooms like, oh, drink chaga tea and it'll cure all your woes, like snake oil, some people literally make claims that chaga just cures everything and, everything that there is. And all you got to do is drink chaga tea and you'll get better. My experience, and that's all I can speak from, although I can reference scientific studies as well, but I'll say from my experience and the scientific studies I've read, it's not that simple. It's not like, Western medicine. It's often like this pill does that. Fungi is a lot more subtle in the way that it works. They have very, very potent properties, but you really do need to come into relationship with them. You need to know how to work with them. One mushroom might be good for one person and not for another person, right? We are ecosystems. Our body are ecosystems. Fungi are part of ecosystems. So we need to become ecologists to understand how to actually work with their medicines, right? They're not magic bullets, one size fits all. The other one too, there's a lot of stuff suggesting, for example, chaga is really good for my gut health. But if I keep eating a lot of fried food and potato chips, I can't just drink chaga tea and think that my gut health is going to go away, right? A lot of mushrooms are really good for our nervous system. There's research showing that they can support with anxiety and depression, but if you continue to drink too much coffee and you watch tons of horror movies and you don't take like those fundamental stressful things out of your life and you think you're just going to take a mushroom pill or drink mushroom tea and it's going to cure you, these are lifestyle things, right? So the mushroom is very supportive. It's not a magic pill. We do the mushrooms in conjunction with making lifestyle changes and other things that support it for a holistic approach, right? So that's what I wanted to share there. I don't want to make it sound like I'm making claims that mushrooms just cure everything, because I don't actually agree with that statement. So I'll leave that there. All right. Let's do a little intro to foraging here, and then I'm going to pass it over to Shane to wrap us up and do a deep dive into medicine, which is going to be really fun in a few moments here. So for me, getting into foraging is really about building relationships with the plants and the fungi. It's a lifelong journey, and I'm going to share 6 tips for getting started with foraging. Tip number 1 is don't be the can I eat it person. One of my biggest pet peeves is going on a Facebook group and seeing a picture that somebody just posted of a bunch of mushrooms they harvested, and they're like, hey, I just picked all these. Can I eat them? And I'm just like, are you kidding me? You're going to ask Facebook if you can eat these mushrooms that you've already picked. You're going to literally risk your life on the opinion of Facebook. How reliable do we think Facebook is these days with giving advice? Right? I'm saying that sarcastically. So the reason I say don't be the eat it person, when you're starting out, this is a multi-year journey. It's super fun. You're building kin. Take your time. Don't be focused on what mushrooms you can eat at first. Focus on good identification skills. Focus on understanding what habitat do the different mushrooms live in. What tree species are they associated with, right? Like one of the ways that we often identify mushrooms is by what plants and trees are they around? Where do we find them in the landscape? What season of the year is it? If you go to harvest a mushroom and you're like, oh, I think it's this mushroom, but it's not growing with the right trees, it might not actually be the mushroom you think it is. Or if you go to harvest a mushroom, but it's like, oh, this is a mushroom I usually harvest in the late fall, but it's early summer. It might not be the mushroom you think it is, right? So to become a good forager, you actually need to become a good naturalist and a good ecologist, which is a ton of fun. So slow down on the can I eat it, enjoy the journey. Over time, you'll build the confidence that you can actually start picking and putting them in your body. But that should be a slow journey because there are lots of dangerous, poisonous, toxic mushrooms out there. Many of them have toxic, dangerous, poisonous lookalikes, right? So take your time doing this. Don't be so focused on what you can eat. Enjoy the journey of building relationship and getting to know them. A couple ways to start doing that is start learning the different parts of the mushroom, right? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the slide, but you can just look this up. If you sign up for the mushroom course, I'm going to tell you about in a few moments ago, though, we will help you learn all the ins and outs of identification. But get to know the different parts of a mushroom. Very foundational in identification. So here's a great example when I come to parts. One of these mushrooms has gills. The other has ridges. Can you tell the difference? Which is a ridge and which is a gill, right? If you don't know, you probably shouldn't be harvesting gilled mushrooms to eat. Some of the best delicate mushrooms for eating, like oyster mushrooms, are gilled mushrooms. Some of our most toxic and poisonous mushrooms are also gilled mushrooms. So we always tell beginner mushrooms, gilled mushrooms are not beginner mushrooms. Okay? You need to know the difference between a gill and a ridge and a bunch of other things before you start harvesting gilled mushrooms. The next one is this trick we call the 5 rights. So we want to make sure we harvest from the right place. So the right habitat, the right trees and stuff around there are part of the ID. We also want to make sure we're harvesting from clean landscapes because mushrooms can accumulate heavy metals. They can accumulate toxins, right? So we want to harvest it from clean soils. We want to have the right ID. Right part is more for foraging. We want the right season or the right time of year. And we want to prepare them properly. So that's tip number 3. Know the 5 rights of foraging. Here's a great little example. There's a little studded puffball on the left there. And on the right, see that little white looks like an egg on the right there? That is a destroying angel, a deadly poisonous mushroom. And see how similar that little white ball on the right is to that ball on the left? I mean, it doesn't have the studs on it, but there's smooth puffballs as well that aren't studded, right? So and I've seen these growing like quite close to each other before, almost next to each other. So imagine this, like you go on a mushroom walk, somebody teaches you, oh, you can eat these little puffball mushrooms, and you're just going along, grabbing them, throwing them in your basket because you just learned this last week. You're all excited. You want to bring them home to your family, and you grab one of those little destroying angels. Seriously, you potentially just killed yourself and a bunch of people you know. Like literally. And I'm being a bit on the fear side right now. Like you do need to really take your time and come into relationship. Because what's going on with that destroying angel there is that's just the first stage of growth. We call it a mushroom egg. So it starts off with this little ball, but that ball is not homogeneous inside. So if I'm going to go to this next slide, if I cut a puffball in half, it's got this homogeneousness right through the middle, kind of like a marshmallow. And that one on the top left is actually a different mushroom that you're not going to eat. It's called an earth ball. The one on the left is the puffball that I would eat. The right one there, so if you look at the picture on the right, there's that longer mushroom now that's actually started to open up. So once the first stage is the egg, but then the stem starts to grow, it reaches up, and then the cap actually rips open and it opens up, and now you have a gilled mushroom, right? But at one part of its life cycle, it actually looks a lot like a puffball. Puffballs are very common, popular edible mushrooms, but many people don't realize there's a stage in growth where they look like a poisonous mushroom. How do we tell them apart? We cut the mushroom in half. And if you cut the destroying angel in half, it won't be homogeneous like a mushroom. It'll actually, you will see the stem growing up the middle of it, right? Okay. Some of the other characteristics you can learn about mushrooms, this is actually an activity from the mushroom course that I have that I'm going to tell you about in a minute. So we send people out on this adventure to basically learn some of the different styles of mushrooms. So we have things like coral and tooth mushrooms, and we've got a really in-depth video teaching you how to tell the difference between them and how to go identify them in nature. Pore mushrooms, that's a bolete there. Sac mushrooms and shelf mushrooms. So this is a morel, and it looks like kind of a horse hoof there, or a false tinder polypore. Fomes fomentarius, I think. We have some puffball mushrooms. Tip number 5, shelf funguses and bolete funguses are some of the safer ones to get started with. So often for beginners, we say, do not harvest gilled mushrooms. Start learning about shelf funguses. Start learning about boletes. They're a relatively safe group to get started with. And avoid gills when you're learning to forage. Okay, the very last tip, and then I'm going to pass it over to Shane in just a couple minutes here right now, is find a mentor to work with. By all means, get a mushroom app on your phone. Those apps are great. They can be a great resources. I've seen mushroom apps call poisonous mushrooms edible before. The app could kill somebody. You can't rely on the app to put something in your mouth. You can't rely on Facebook to put on something in your mouth. By all means, post a picture on Facebook, ask a question, see what the app says, check a field guide, and ask a person. And always, at the end of the day, it should be a person with lots of experience that is the final call. And I'm going to just throw it up there again. That's why, I'm going to give another shout out to Laura's Wild, our Fungi as Kin program. Like this in-person sessions, and not just one day, but like multiple sessions where you get to see them throughout the year in different stages of the growth. That's where you really start to develop the confidence to be able to forage and do them as well. So I just threw the link up to the Fungi as Kin program again there as well. So beyond that, so you can come and take a class with us with Wild Muskoka. There's a great book, Mushrooming Without Fear. I highly recommend this book right here. Is a great way for getting started. And there's my mushroom course. So I'm going to take a moment right now just to tell you about my online course. And again, thank you for letting me do this. I'm hoping that folks are learning a lot. Maybe even let me know. Are you learning stuff so far? Are people finding this valuable? I'm trying to find a nice balance between really delivering stuff that you can walk away with. I'm sincere and passionate about spreading the stuff, and I need to make a living too. So the way that I'm able to do this free stuff is by letting folks know about some of my paid offerings for those of you that want to go a little bit deeper and want an actual mentor in your corner. Oh, great. Aria, Krista saying it's great. So appreciate that people are finding some value in this and that they're learning. Oh, nice. Miriam, I'm overcoming some fear. I love that we're helping you with that. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my mushroom course, and then I'm going to pass it over to Shane to dive into medicinal mushrooms. Maybe just a quick little recap. I've kind of hit on this a lot, so I won't spend a lot of time, but why do I think it's so relevant to learn to grow mushrooms and forage in our modern world? Food security and self-reliance, right? You can grow a large quantity in a small space. It's a really efficient use of time. Like the amount of calories you get back for what you put in is amazing. They're perennials, so they come back year after year. Fungi are also incredibly nutrient dense. So proteins, vitamins, minerals, all the medicinal compounds we talk about. There's also things like mycoremediation, like literally using mushrooms to clean up toxins from the landscape. So they're amazing. It just seems so relevant to be building our relationships with fungi, given the current state of the world right now. Okay, another quick little survey here. I'm curious, out of everything we're talking about right now, what is piquing your interest? Why are you most interested to learn to grow and forage? Do you want to save money on groceries? Are you looking for increased food security and self-reliance? Do you want to improve your health and your wellness? Is it just because mushrooms are straight up awesome? Or is it all of the above? So little questionnaire there. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my mushroom course right now. So I am actually, I think proud is even the right word. I've put a lot of work into this. Like I started learning to grow over 20 years ago. My wife, Laura, is become a real expert in identification and medicine making and wild fungi foraging. So we have been taking, our between us, 40 years of experience and turning it into this really cool evergreen course. And we're actually running a 4-day sale on it right now for 40% off. It's on sale for 4 days only. So let me put out the link to the course really quick. Whoops. Where is this one? So this is the online mushroom course. I just put the link up there. If you sign up, you get instant access to a swath of videos teaching you a whole bunch of stuff. And let me kind of go through what we actually cover in the course. So first off, who is the course? Who do we design it for? This course is designed for people, maybe you don't want to grow mushrooms and you don't even know if you'll forage, but you just find this fascinating, interesting. You could absolutely sign up for this course just out of curiosity and just have some fun learning about this like foundational keystone organism in the Earth's ecology. If you're somebody that's a little bit concerned about food security, rising prices, and you want to be more self-reliant, absolutely, mushrooms should be something you consider. If you're a gardener and you just want to grow more things in your vegetable garden, then mushrooms are an amazing thing to add to your garden. They can also help you build better soil, which creates better yields of your vegetable garden as well. So great for soil building. If you love nature and you want to be able to identify mushrooms when you're out in the wild, or maybe get into foraging your own mushrooms, this course is designed for you. If people that want to improve their health and their wellness through working with fungi medicine, this course will have a lot for you. The other one is great. I've had a lot of school groups sign up for this, like homeschool groups or even parents that want to do it with their kids. So these are all great groups that this course is designed for. What do we actually cover in the course itself? We talk about many different techniques to grow indoors and outdoors so you can grow year round. The goal is to help you grow an entire year worth of food if you want to, or if you just want to experiment and have some fun, that's fine too. We get into growing shiitakes, oysters, wine caps, lion's mane, and more. We have in-depth lessons on ecology. And probably one of my favorite parts of the course, and this part we're adding new lessons every year, is the virtual mushroom walk. So Laura does in-person mushroom walks where, 15, 20 people will follow her around the forest, and she'll go through and tell you, how to ID the mushroom and all these different things. At the end of the walk, people's heads are usually spinning with how much information they have. This is really great because it gives you the close-up of the mushroom. You can really see what she's pointing at. You can listen to it multiple times. You can go back and watch it again. So we basically created a virtual mushroom walk with Laura with some of the common mushrooms you'll find around North America. Beyond that, you have myself and Laura as your guides, and Shane is also getting involved with the course now and some other guest instructors. So you can ask us your questions. You have access to us for your growing and foraging questions. We're going to help you avoid some of the most common mistakes and speed up your learning journey, both for growing and foraging. The course supports you with figuring out all the logistics. So whether you live in an urban apartment or have a small urban lot, or you have a farm out in the country, maybe you even want to start a mushroom growing business, you can ask us questions. We'll help you figure out those logistics and make it work for your unique scenario. And we're going to help you learn to grow and forage safely and sustainably. And that's maybe one of the most important parts right there. Now, this is a new addition to the class that's just happening this year, and I'm super excited about this. I'm actually going to be raising the price of the course soon because of this new component of the class. In the past, this was a completely just evergreen, watch the courses on your own time. That's not changing. There's a massive database of videos, worksheets, printouts, instructions already in there with all these different things. But this year, I'm actually bringing in a whole bunch of mushroom experts for live calls. So we have 7 of them on the calendar right now, and the first one is next week. So next week, Shane is going to be coming back, and we're going to do a real deep dive into lion's mane medicine making and how to grow lion's mane. April 22nd, we're going to do a class on getting ready for the growing season. So I'm going to be running that one. So you can come. I'll get you set up for growing for this year and answer any questions you have. On May 13th, my buddy Steve, and I think Laura's coming for that one. We're going to do an intro to spring foraging. So we'll talk about what mushrooms you can forage in the spring. In August, Shane's coming back, and we're going to get into mycoremediation. So using fungi to actually clean up toxins from the landscape and other uses for fungi beyond food and medicine. So Shane even does building with mushrooms. I'll let him speak to that. September 12th, we're going to do a fall foraging and species ID and ecology one. In October, Laura's coming back, and we're going to do mushrooms in the kitchen and medicine chest. So Laura's going to be talking about cooking with mushrooms and medicine making for the winter. And then in November, Shane's going to come back in, and we're going to talk about DIY indoor growing and get you set up for the winter season if you want to grow indoors. So you get all of these inside of the course. So lifetime access, 40% off right now. The 40% off sale is on for 4 days only. And it includes lifetime access, all of the bonus live calls that I just mentioned. I'm going to stop talking now, leave it there. If you would like access to that course, though, the link is up on the screen right now. So I'm going to stop my share and pass it over to Shane right now. Do you want to come on stage, Shane? All right, Shane, I went a little bit longer this morning or this evening sessions, but I think we can run a few minutes over. I mean, you could probably take us till 9:30, and then we'll do the Q&A after that. So
Yeah, right on. Cool. Thanks for that, Chris.
hey, Shane, maybe before you go in, you kind of told us a little bit about Heartwood, but maybe just elaborate a little bit more. What are some of the services that you offer? What do you guys get up to? And then I'd love to hear your growing presentation.
Yeah, cool. So in Northern Ontario, Manitoulin, Sudbury region, we do fresh mushrooms all year round. We're part of a few CSAs and deliver to restaurants, farmers markets, and grocery stores. We also do consumer packaged goods, dried value-added mushroom products around Canada, and we ship coast to coast. I got one order in Newfoundland and one order in Victoria, so officially coast to coast, which is something to be proud of. We also do mycoremediation. So this is a kind of a nerdy passion project that I work on. So I find various chemicals or toxins that people don't really know what to deal with, and I train mycelium to break them down, and I try to create these workflows incorporating them with hot composting, vermicomposting, and try to take something that is inherently antithetical to life and make it okay to be a part of living soil again. So that's one thing that I nerd out on. And another thing is mycomaterials, which Chris mentioned. So I take mycelium and waste products and I make things like this. This is let's see if we can get it in focus here. This is a plant pot that I made out of mycelium and agricultural waste product. And that's something that I'm doing more and more of these days. So I'm partnering with the fashion department at a university in Toronto, and we are taking textile wastes and we're learning how to process them and fuse them together with mycelium and make new products that have more utility on their way to them becoming soil. So if you're interested in learning about that, we'll be doing a deep dive into that later on. And then I also do, or Heartwood Mushrooms does workshops all around. We go into schools, we do skill shares, gatherings, and basically we try to create interfaces, or we try to meet people where they're at with the mycelium. So depending on the context that they are working in. That's a little bit about what Heartwood Mushroom does when we're not on webinars here. And I'll dive into.
I'll
Yeah,
just
Chris.
say, I think folks can tell why I called him a mad scientist before after hearing that.
The name of the company is Heartwood Mushrooms, Angie. Cool. So we're going to be looking at lion's mane tonight, specifically lion's mane. And this is the course, or rather, this is the presentation that I wish I had like 5 years ago. I spent a lot of time experimenting and growing with lion's mane that really could have been a lot better and could have served myself and my friends and my community a lot better. And there wasn't a lot of straightforward resources, and there's a lot of conflicting or confusing resources out there specifically around lion's mane. And so I created this to increase the amount of literacy that we have, and so that hopefully you all can make better choices for yourself, or at least with more clarity and with more accuracy. So we are going to look at what makes lion's mane beneficial to the human body, what forms you may find it in, and understanding the labels you might find on products on shelves. Now, if you're someone that does want to go the supplement route, this will help help you understand how to read that. But I think it's also just a really valuable exercise to kind of get an understanding and hopefully an intuitive sense of the different potencies or concentrations the different forms come in. And the next 20 minutes, and let's see if we'll do it in less than that. I'll try to do it in 15 minutes and get you all educated on this. And as I went through this already, so I won't go through it again. And how I got here. So years ago, I was told lion's mane was good for the brain. I just trusted that. So I started growing it, and I started making some products like alcohol extracts and herbal mushroom teas. Some of those were better than others. I had a friend that had his 5th concussion with terrible symptoms for years, like couldn't look at a screen, had ringing in his ears, tinnitus of multiple tones at the same time, couldn't work. It was really, really awful. And I knew that lion's mane was supposed to help with that, but I just didn't have a confidence to give him something that I made and say, hey, this is going to help you. So I talked to herbalists, other mad scientists, concussion specialists, mycologists, and I learned a lot. And from there, I was able to make better products and also understand more of what was available on the shelves. Because there wasn't a lot of literacy around this, I started writing some articles, making some short videos around lion's mane literacy. And this is for people who are curious, open to learning about mushrooms as a tool for better living, burgeoning mushroom cultivators, and those who feel confused and want to learn more about lion's mane and how to use it. So, lion's mane, the good stuff. We know that it's good for the brain, or if you don't, you now know that it's good for your brain. The reason why that is 2 compounds, hericenones and erinacins. And you don't have to know what those, or you don't have to memorize them. But what they do is they stimulate the growth of a protein in our systems called nerve growth factor. These lock into our nerve cells, kind of like a key, and trigger a signal to say, hey, heal yourself. Hey, branch out more. Hey, make more connections. And basically, they almost give it permission and support, and it's a nurturing support to our neurons to take care of themselves. These 2 compounds are also alcohol soluble, And I'll come back to that in a little bit later, and you'll understand why. Lion's mane also has a bunch of polysaccharides, and specifically we're looking at the beta-glucans. These beta-glucans are antioxidants, they support immune function, and are water soluble. There's one problem. We can't digest any of this. And that's because these potent, powerful molecules are bound to something called chitin. If you don't know what chitin is, it's a carbon-based compound, very large molecule, and that's what lobster shells are made out of. That's what insect exoskeletons are made out of. It's a very, very, very robust compound. And fungi, specifically mushrooms and mycelium, they create these tiny, thin webs, microtubules of it to help create structure in the mycelium. And then they embed the hericenones and the beta-glucans into that, and we just can't break it down. So we have to do stuff to it first in order for humans to be able to digest it. And being clever humans, we've devised a few ways of doing that. The easiest way is just cooking it. If you have fresh lion's mane, you can just cook it, and you will get the goodness out of it. It'll denate, or it'll break down the chitin, break those bonds, and be able and make it more accessible for the body to get the good stuff. You can also do alcohol extractions, which rupture the cells and separates those molecules. You can also do fermenting. And I said kind of because it has a little bit of an effect, but not a huge effect. Fermenting is really good at breaking down really simple sugars. If you think about fermenting wine or beer or even kombucha, it's breaking down simple sugars. Chitin is not a simple sugar. It is huge and complicated. So there is only so much fermentation can do. That being said, you will find some fermented lion's mane or fermented mushroom products out there. Micronizing is something that we will probably see more and more of in the coming years. It means grinding it down really, really small, like finer than flour. Grinding it so small, you're basically rupturing it at the cell level. And this is particularly cool because you don't need any kinds of heat. You don't need alcohol involved. And depending on the use case and the context, that may be desirable. We don't often see micronizing with lion's mane because it's a very soft-bodied mushroom compared to something like chaga, which is incredibly hard. You'll typically see that more on the more robust fungi, but you also see, sometimes you might come across it. Okay, so the different forms that we find lion's mane in. So like I said, we have it fresh, or you can even dry it, and you can cook lion's mane from dried, and I'll get a bit more into that later. Powder. This is where I want to bring some importance to this because it tripped me up. Powders can come as a whole dried powder, which is the mushroom, dehydrated, and powderized. There's also the extract where you use water and alcohol or maybe other solvents, and you pull out the hericenones and the beta-glucans, and then you remove the liquid and you're left with an extract powder. And these two things do something completely different. No, they do the same thing, but you got to deal with them a bit different. There we go. You have to cook the whole powder, right? You have to process it in some way in order to release it. Drying and grinding it isn't enough on its own for it to become digestible by humans. Whereas an extract powder is something that you can just put in your tea or coffee and it will get absorbed very readily. Tinctures or dual extracts are another way you can process lion's mane, and typically that involves doing an alcohol extraction and pressing it, filtering it, and then taking that and then doing a hot water extraction. So like a slow cooker for a couple hours, pressing it and filtering it. Earlier on, I mentioned that the hericenones and erinacins are alcohol soluble, and the beta-glucans are water soluble. So when you see a dual extract, what that allows you to do is allows you to get both of those compounds. You get both the nerve-supporting compounds and the immune-supporting compounds. So dual extracts and tinctures are a fairly popular way to go. You'll also see capsules. Hopefully they are an extract powder, because if they are just a whole powder, then it'll be very hard for the body to digest that and get anything good out of it. You'll also see various coffee products. So like Four Sigmatic, mud water, and those are going to be extract powders. So hot water will be able to dissolve that and get that into your body. I've also done a number of experiments trying to make alcohol-free extracts, more concentrated extracts, and I've made weird tars, resins, and even this sand-like stuff that was really strange. I used that in my coffee for a little while, but ultimately I gave up on that one. Anyways, that's neither this nor that. How much should I take? Disclaimer, this is not medical advice. This is just what I have learned for myself and talking to people, and from the scientific literature that I've read. So most maintenance doses hang out in the 250 to 500 milligram range. And this is of the whole dried mushroom. So that's not very much. I said feeling it on there as the second tier because I was doing maintenance doses for weeks, for doing months, and I'm like, I think this works. And it was in that phase where I was not confident giving that to my friend. So then I read a paper that taught me about concussion recovery and lion's mane, and I started doing 1,000 milligrams, then 2,000 and 3,000, and it was at 1,000 milligrams where I would take it in my coffee, and within an hour later, I'm doing admin work, desk work, and I'm like, holy crap, I am feeling on the ball in like mental clarity in a way that I hadn't experienced in a long time. And I'm like, oh, is this what lion's mane is supposed to feel like, at least in a more intense dose? Obviously, as a tonic dose, you're not going to get those kinds of peaks of experience, if you will. But yeah, those were kind of the ranges. And so now I'm back down kind of into a maintenance phase. But for me personally, it was important for me to go into concussion recovery zone to try and just say like, oh, I'm feeling something. Cool. So now let's look at some of the products. So I just took screenshots of some of the most common products out on the market. And we're going to go back to, and we're going to refer to some previous things that I mentioned to really understand what's going on the label. Right. Of course, the first one is a fresh lion's mane. This is what it looks like. So these are lion's mane that I grow. On the left is the whole lion's mane in all of its glory. And on the right is a kind of a strange frilly growth pattern. If you let lion's mane get mature and grow longer, each of those icicles will get longer, and it really gets beautiful. So that's a really zoomed in picture. I tear them up into chunks about maybe that big before I dehydrate them. These are also really good if you just want to saute them, put a bit of tamari on it. Absolutely delicious. But you only need to saute them for maybe about 10, 15, 20 minutes, kind of in that range on a low medium heat. And that's enough to start breaking down the chitin bonds. Actually, you can break down quite a bit of the chitin bonds and start getting the benefits from that. You're never going to get as much compared to if you're intentionally doing an extract. Like that, in that case, you're putting your effort into getting as much potency as possible. Oftentimes, when we are cooking food, we are trying to nourish ourselves. We're trying to enjoy the food that we're eating, and we're often not being scientifically and industrially rigorous in our cooking, which I think is probably a good thing. When we dry it, it gets kind of yellow like that, or golden. I absolutely love that color personally. And you can throw it in a soup, in stews. If it has a lot of moisture and water in it, it'll just cook up like that. Eat it whole. Or you can soak it in warm water or broth and then saute it as though it was a fresh mushroom if you wanted to. This is some whole powder that we make. Looks kind of like a slightly off-white, chalky kind of thing. And again, this is not something that you want to just throw into a cup of coffee and drink. It won't hurt you, but you won't be getting a lot of this stuff out of it. This is something that you want to cook with. So one thing that I really have been enjoying doing lately is making golden milk. So with coconut milk and ginger and turmeric and pepper and maple syrup, and then simmering that on low for 20 minutes. Oh my gosh, that has been my winter in a nutshell. So good. Cool. So here's the first product that I found. So Bloomable Natural Products Lion's Mane Mushroom Powder. So I looked on the back of the packaging. I looked on all the website. I looked on the product description page, and this was the closest thing I could find to what's in it. Just says grown on wood, 100% fruiting body mushrooms. No fillers, no starch, no grains, no mycelium. Typically, I'm looking for words like extract or activated or micronized or something like that to help tell me if it's just a raw powder or if it's an extract. And based on the description here, I am leaning towards this just being a raw powder. So again, you want to cook that and not just throw it in your smoothie. They also do an extract powder. Oh, and before I go further, I'm not advocating for or unadvocating for any of these products. These are just products that I find, and this is about lion's mane label literacy. And here's where things start getting interesting. So on the right, on the supplement facts, we see lion's mane mushroom 4:1 extract. And this is where I want to bring your attention to the 4:1. In powdered extracts, 4:1 means that 1 gram of this extract powder equals 4 grams of the dried lion's mane. So with 1 gram of this, you're already on the high end of a concussion recovery dose. So that's pretty cool. You can also see beta-glucans are contained down below, and some lion's mane products will put their beta-glucan measurements. For the extract, the 4:1, in general, big number, more potent, if you want to think of it like that. So like a 4:1 is more potent than a 1:1, for example. Let's see, host defense lion's mane capsules. So again, I looked on the labels, I looked on the website. This one is fermented mycelium. So this isn't the fruiting body. And there's a lot of debate around mycelium versus fruiting body. I'm not going to get into that here. What I'm interested in, is it activated? Is it digestible? And here we see it's fermented. And I didn't find anything about it being extract. So this does contain brown rice biomass. It contains slightly fermented mycelium. So I'm not sure how digestible or how accessible or bioactive? What's the word I'm looking for? Anyways, you know what I'm trying to say. How available, there we go. That's how available it is to the body compared to like an extract powder, for example. Let's see, real mushrooms. Cool. So this is more extract powders. They do a capsule and then they do a powder. In this case, we see it's a 1:1. Organic lion's mane mushroom extract 1:1. So this stuff would be 4 times less potent than the other lion's mane extract that I mentioned before. And I'm trying to be very precise when talking about potency. I'm not saying it's better, I'm not saying it's worse, because I think what's important here is that we understand what's actually in the stuff so that we can make the best decisions for ourselves. Cool. So that's powders. Let's move into tinctures and dual extracts or liquid extracts. So I looked on here and I saw 4 milliliters and 800 milligrams. So doing a little bit of math, that works out to a 1:5 potency. And in tincture world, that ratio there describes, basically it means it takes 5 milliliters of solvent, so alcohol and or water, to extract 1 gram of the lion's mane mushroom. This stuff right here is considerably less potent and is a 1:29 potency. So it takes 29 milliliters to do 1 gram of mushrooms. So in this entire bottle, you only get about 4 grams of dried lion's mane equivalent. This is the one that I make, and I tried to make it easy for everyone, and I just put the number right on there, 1 to 8. So it's 125 milligrams per milliliter here. So whereas the extract powder, it was big number more potent. In tincture world, it's smaller number more potent, if that makes sense. And if there's questions about that, I'm happy to go over it again. But that was one of the things that tripped me up for quite a while. Cool. This was Mudwater, I believe. So a coffee replacement substitute kind of thing. They're very kind. On the top right on their website, they just say it's 560 milligrams per serving. That's great. So thank you, Mudwater, for making that easy. And then so for Sigmatic, they have a whole bunch of different functional mushroom-based products. And in their supplement facts, they also have the amounts right in there. So 500 milligrams per cup of coffee. This was really important because I remember at one point I found it was like one product that it was like 80 milligrams of lion's mane per cup of coffee. And even to get a maintenance dose, you need to have like 5-6 cups of coffee. And I'm like, oh man, that doesn't feel great. Like, I mean, 6 cups of coffee does not feel great in and of itself. But I mean, there's the branding of lion's mane. It's good for you, good health, and it's coming nowhere close to even doing a maintenance dose. So now hopefully you have the knowledge that you know to make decisions that are good for you. So did we look at what makes lion's mane good for us? They've got hericenones, erinacins, which promote nerve growth factor. They've got beta-glucans, but we know that chitin gets in the way from us digesting it. Check. We know it comes in fresh, dried. We know that powders can either be a whole raw powder or an extract powder. We know that we have tinctures and that capsules and coffees typically use the extract powders. Check. Understanding labels. Typically looking for things like activated or extract to help me determine how to actually use the product, whether I'm going to be cooking with it or just putting it in a smoothie or a cup of coffee. Extract powders like 4-to-1 or 1-to-1. So the first number higher is more potent. And the tinctures like 1-to-5, 1-to-8, second number lower is more potent. Oh, and just one more thing. I played around with tinctures. I was trying to make a 1-to-1 extract. So a really, really potent one. And my goodness, that was the tar that I talked about. It ended up turning into tar. It was not pleasant to eat, but anyways, I digress. And then dosing. Maintenance dose, hanging around between 250 to 500 milligrams approximately. For me, I start feeling it around 100 milligrams, 1,000 milligrams, and then clinical concussion recovery doses range between 1,000 to 3,000 milligrams. Check. Great. So if you like this and you want to go deeper into how to grow lion's mane, how to actually do the processing, we talk about the steps, the equipment, the tools, the extraction solvents, times, temperatures. We get really nerdy. We are going to talk about the biochemistry. So if you're into that, then come check us out. And to close it all off a little for the extra micro-curious, as Chris said, we do this for free, offering this value to you. And we are able to do this because we also have our businesses where we are able to sell services, courses, and stuff like that. So now that you know how to read this stuff, this little bundle right here that I made for you guys has a 1-to-8 dual extract of lion's mane, whole dried fruiting body, and chunks, and the powder. So it's already 15% off. And if you sign up now, you get an extra 5% off. And I'll send you a link to the article that outlines my entire adventure from lion's mane ignorance to basically where I am today. So go on and check that out if you're interested. I send out newsletters periodically. I'm never spamming you. I'm basically talking about things that fire me up and make me the most excited. So the mycelium plant pot that I told you about, if I'm doing myco-remediation, that's kind of my platform for I talk about there. So if you're interested in hanging out with me over the long term, go drop your email address in there and we'll continue the conversation. Thanks, everyone. And I'll hand it back to you, Chris.
All right, Chris, thanks so much, Shane. And all right, crew. So we're going to wrap up quite quickly here. So thank you those for sticking around. We are going to take a few questions. I do want to, has everybody got the link that Shane just put up there? And I got to say, Shane's article on lion's mane is super fascinating. There's a few people in my life that have concussions, and I've found a ton of value in it. So if you click on the link that's up there right now, It'll ask for your name and email, fill that in, and then Shane will send you a link to that article on Lion's Mane. And then, of course, if you would like to buy some of his Lion's Mane stuff, you can get it through that link as well. Also watch for an email from me there, and you can get it as well. So going once, going twice. I'm about to take down that link. I will resend it in the follow-up email, though. Just wanted to shout out kind of 2 things really quick, and then we'll take a few questions to close us out tonight. But I hope folks are finding this really interesting. I learned a ton from Shane's presentation there. I found it quite fascinating. So quick little reminder just about the 2 courses I mentioned with Laura as well. There's a couple spots left in the Fungi as Kin program. So I just threw the link up for that one more time. Shane talked about dual mushroom extracts. Like that's one of the things you'll actually get to do in person with Laura and go home with if you join the Fungi as Kin. She will teach you about how to make multiple different types of extracts and work with mini mushrooms. And of course, one of the benefits is getting to actually see them in the different seasons out on the land. So if that interests you, the link's up there right now for the Fungi as Kin program. She also has the wild medicine program for the foraging. And then the last thing I'll throw out there, and again, thank you so much, folks, for letting me take a few minutes to share about our products, because we did this for free. We hope that there was a lot of value and that you learned a lot. But of course, we get paid by letting you folks know about some of the paid offerings. And I really do stand behind these. You know, we put a lot of work in them. We really, truly care about this. So just coming back to that offering that I shared there is the online mushroom course. Kind of covers all of this stuff online. So if you're down in the States, you can't get to be with us in person. This course is full of videos. We're going to be doing all those live sessions. So literally a week from today, Shane's going to be back on, me and him. And it's only for members in the paid course. And we're going to do a real deep dive into Lion's Mane. And we're going to get into actually how to make your own extracts, how to grow it, get deeper into the medicinal values, fun stuff like that. We've got the foraging, we've got the growing, all of that. So the link is up there right now for the mushroom course. And remember, that sale is only 4 days. So that ends on Saturday. And I do plan on raising the price of the course. So right now you get 40% off of the lower price. It will go up pretty soon because of all of these live sessions we're adding to it. So if you need to roll out, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had a great time. Maybe even just throw in, actually, no, don't put anything in the chat because we're going to take some questions. But thank you so much. I hope you had a great time. We'll stick around for maybe 5 minutes and answer a couple of questions here. So if folks want to, you can just write those in the chat and then Shane or I'll answer them depending what they are.
Yeah, we got a question from Kathy. So would it be best to cook the mushroom and then freeze dry it whole or powder it? So freeze drying obviously preserves like pretty much all the nutrients there, but it doesn't do anything for making it more active or just separating the chitin from the other stuff there. So it comes down to how do you want to use it, right? If you want to cook it and then freeze dry it and powder it, then you have something that you can throw in smoothies. If you want to keep it whole, then that's something that you'll have a bit more texture for cooking with.
Awesome. Any other ones coming up?
I marked one earlier from Wendy, and this was for you while you were talking, Chris. When introducing new mushrooms to your diet that are considered edible, are there any cautions needed? Like, should you start with small amounts to see if you react?
Yeah. So a lot of the mushrooms are generally pretty. So this is a bit of a tough question because some people do have food sensitivities and can have sensitivities to mushrooms. So that's the first thing I just want to say. It's hard to make a blanket statement. So I would I'll say this, there's many mushrooms that are generally safe and most people can eat them in quantity without a problem. But if you're one of those rare people that has a sensitivity, it could really throw you off. So, it's even with food, it's not a bad idea to start in small quantities. There are particular mushrooms though, that can be harder to digest in larger quantities and people are more likely to struggle with. And some species that some people struggle with and others don't. So for example, the wine caps actually, I've even noticed it myself. I can eat shiitakes every single day. I can eat lion's mane every day. I can eat oysters every day. Wine caps, if I eat them more than 2 or 3 days in a row, my stomach actually starts to not feel great. I don't know what it is. I don't know if you know that, Shane, but there's something in the wine caps, and I've heard this from other people. So I'll have 1 or 2 wine cap mushrooms, and then I'll actually take a break for a few days, and then I'll eat some more. I cannot eat wine caps regularly, or I start to actually have not feel great with them. Honey mushrooms would be an example of a wild mushroom that many people don't actually handle honey mushrooms well. So if it's a new mushroom, actually, this might be a good way to answer it. Probably most of the ones you're buying in the grocery store, you could probably feel pretty safe that eating a larger amount, you're fine for the first time. Any wild mushroom, I would probably say it's a smart idea to start with a very small amount first, see how it sits with you, and know that there are a handful that are edible, but some people are bothered more than others from it. And too much over time can be problematic.
I will tack on to that. So sometimes if a mushroom is improperly cooked, or some people enjoy eating mushrooms raw, is even if they are choice edible gourmet mushrooms, the chitin doesn't digest well. And even just that compound alone can be an irritant for your digestive system.
Cool. Gene said you want to learn to grow outdoors. No, you don't need to do anything with your logs other than, so your logs should be in a shady spot, right? If you got them into the understory of some evergreen trees, my logs, I basically grow in the understory of evergreens. You could have them on the north side of a building where they're in the shade. The big thing that you're worried about is just moisture loss. So let's say you have a really dry winter and there's not a lot of snow on the ground. That could be problematic because the wind and everything's drying them out, right? So I like that my logs get buried in snow. If they're not getting buried in snow, putting them into some type of shelter where that humidity is held a little better. You could maybe even throw a tarp or something over top of them for the season. Or the other one is you can also add additional moisture. If there's not a lot of snow during the melt out, you could water those logs in the springtime with the sprinkler. But generally, you don't have to do much. Same with my wine caps, which are going on the straw. I don't do anything. I just let the snow cover them. They come back up again the next year. So
Yeah, I thoroughly neglect my wine cap bed, and it produces year after year. It's pretty fantastic. Kathy, any advantages to taking a tincture versus cooking and eating them as far as nutritional and medicinal value? So you're going to get more of the compounds out of an extract like a tincture versus cooking and eating them. That being said, if you have the skills to be growing lion's mane, you can just be eating steaks, huge lion's mane steaks, and you can kind of make up for that. But we're talking about efficiencies that probably don't matter too much. Tinctures are more, they're just quick. So if you're on the move or you just don't want to think about it, it's just an easy way to get into your body. I generally tend towards whole foods. So I would typically prefer cooking the lion's mane and eating the whole thing because there's a lot of really complex biochemistry that goes on there that I think the body attunes to. Even though my conscious mind may not be aware of it, there's a lot of wisdom in that as well.
All right, maybe we'll make Tammy Lynn's question the last question of the night here. So Tammy says, what time and duration are the bonus live sessions for inside of the course? We're going to actually do some of them in the evening and some of them during the day. Some people prefer one or the other, so I'm kind of mixing them up. All of the live sessions, there will be a replay. So even if you can't make it for us live, you can watch the replay and you have lifetime access to all those replays. So even there are a few live sessions that I've done in the past that are in there still. So you can go back and watch past ones. Although I've never had a year like this where I'm doing so many in a year. And they'll probably be on average an hour and a half, I would say on average, probably an hour to an hour and a half for those live sessions. So thanks so much everyone for coming here. I hope you had a great night. I hope you learned some things. I hope you're feeling inspired. I actually had a ton of fun. I love doing this. This is my first time teaching with Shane today. We did this twice. And we had a blast, or I had a blast.
I had a blast.
Glad you had a blast too. So I'll say good night, everyone. Maybe the last thing is just watch for a follow-up email that I'm going to send you tomorrow morning with some of the links and resources we talked about tonight. So if you weren't able to capture the links for whatever reason, you'll get that in the morning as well as the replay if you want to share it with anyone. So yeah, night, everybody. Thanks again. Have a good evening.
Take care.